Good evening and welcome to the August 3rd Olathe Board of Education meeting. Joy, would you call the roll?
Mr. Wycliffe?
Here.
Mr. Shear? Mr. Beveridge?
Here.
Mr. McCune?
Here.
Mrs. Martin? Here. Mrs. Felter? Mr. Poland?
Would you all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to make just a quick introduction of a special guest we have in our room this evening. We have Aiden Sitzman. He is with Troop 412. He is a Mission Trail student. He is here to earn his Communications Merit Badge, and we welcome him here this evening. Thank you, Aiden. We're glad you're here. Well, moving on to 2.01, we'd like to hear from John Hutchinson. He's got some information for us, preliminary budget information. With what we hear or don't hear from Topeka, he's going to bring us up to date.
I had to run to the car to get my glasses, so I obviously didn't edit my slides well enough because there's a couple numbers I couldn't even read. So this evening we're going to walk through the preliminary budget. Thank you for your flexibility to discuss it this evening. As you start to do the math, as we saw that the Supreme Court had not reached a decision yet, KSDE released the budget worksheets last Friday. Because we have to publish a notice of hearing, publication dates aren't every day. So working backwards from the 25th, when our budgets are all due to be certified, we either had to do it tonight or meet again on Monday. So I thank you very much for agreeing to do that this evening. The notice of hearing, as I said, gets published in the Olathe News section. It will publish next Saturday, but we have to submit it by Tuesday. And I'm going to walk through the components because I know we've been in a block grant, so some of these variables haven't been in play for a while, but many have returned. We always reminder that we set this notice of hearing as kind of a maximum. We set it very high. There's buffering that is done within both revenues and expenditures. And I want to explain what buffering is. It's not that we're just padding numbers all over the place. The idea of buffering is you legal maxes in each fund say this is all you're allowed to spend. If you suddenly get more special ed revenue or more federal money, you can only spend up to what ends up getting published. So it's recommended you perhaps add $1 million to special ed revenue and $1 million to expenditures so that the actual operating budget, if for some reason a new source comes in, you are allowed to spend it because you've set all those budgets a little bit higher. So we have done that. But I'm gonna walk through some of the key assumptions that we have in this year's budget. This year's budget is built around an increase of 17 students to 29,651. A big piece of that growth is we traditionally have had 60 preschool slots approved. This year we're approved for 144. Some of the additional funding that's coming in, there's actually 2 funding sources for that. But if you read between those numbers and lines, it would have been, I would have been calling Chris Groll up to say, are you sure I'm going to stand at that podium and say this is the first year we've declined? Now FTE is growing, but if we didn't have that increase of 84 students, we would have been in a negative projection. Whether that's the reality on September 20 is yet to be seen, but as you can see, we are definitely slowing. FTE, which is what the funding is based on, has been set at an increase of 1,122. 895 of that is the other half of kindergarten. All kindergartners are now counted as a 1 FTE, so that has increased our count. Also remember, the 17 student growth really doesn't matter till next year. All of the funding is based on the prior year enrollments. Weightings that we're going to get into in a moment are current year. So if we grew 500 students, we would have to staff for those 500 students, but the money would come next year in the base funding. Does that make sense? May not make sense, but do you understand that piece of it? But We used to do a growth contingency, and growth contingency was when we were growing a lot, we would say we're going to add 450 students to this calculation of state aid so that if we have a surprise on the first day of school, we can get our funding. Otherwise, the numbers get adjusted, our state aid gets adjusted down, and we would be fine. Doesn't work that way anymore because we're based on the prior year. So I could add 400 students to that 17 students. It wouldn't do anything to my funding. What we have done, because weightings are current year, we've added 10% to those weightings that I've listed. All of the at-risk, the bilingual, career technical ed, new facilities, and transportation, just in case any of those are a little higher, we'd have the authority to accept that money and spend it. This year, we've had a 9.9% assessed valuation growth. That's both commercial and residential, and they're pretty even this year. Residential might be a little less than that, and commercial just a little higher. But across the board, we've seen a 9.9% valuation growth and built the budget around that. The base funding is literally now called BASE. It stands for Base Aid for Student Excellence. We used to call it Base State Aid per Pupil. It has been established at $4,006. While that is a great increase over what we had been receiving prior to and during the block grant, it's still $394 less than its high point back in 2009. If you look at the history of kind of where this base or base state aid per pupil has been, the old formula that's been replaced, when it started, we were at about $3,600. In 08-09, we were at it hit its high of $4,400. And quite honestly, we never saw that $4,400. We did our budget documents, but then a rescission occurred before we even got the first payment. But on paper, it was scheduled for $4,400. In 12-13, right before the block grant, the low was $3,838. Under the block grant, although there really wasn't a base state aid, it was at $3,852 right before it, and we were frozen in at that level, and now we're back at $4,006. So it's definitely going the right direction. Our new funding formula has a CPI adjustment to it, and so that $4,006 will increase each year based on a CPI factor. Other budget considerations, some that the budget is built around, but the board will have to think about in a little more depth. The strategy was to maximize any state aid available. So capital outlay, you're going to see set at 8 mils. We maximize the LOB that's available to us. Otherwise, we're leaving money on the table. So both of those funds, we've utilized the board's maximum authority. Bond and interest levy cannot increase because of our promise. You won't see it increase. I apologize to Mr. Allison. He pointed out I probably shouldn't use cannot there. But we did promise, so to me, that's a cannot. Utilities are budgeted in the general fund and the LOB funds, not in the capital outlay fund. And why I draw that to your attention is currently the way the law is written, we can utilize capital outlay for our utilities. That's one of the things we question whether the Supreme Court will agree. So for the time being, I have built those into our general fund budget. Even if we shifted those to capital outlay, I think we've discussed before, it starts to put more and more pressure on capital outlay for non-capital outlay things, which will increase our reliance on bond issues for repairs throughout the years. We have shifted no new salaries to capital outlay. There are some technician salaries that we could still shift over there, but I went flat with the amount we had already had in there from last year. The opening of West, just to remind you, is going to require additional use of BOTA authority. Back when we opened Northwest, the district utilized about 3 mills. And I just want to clarify, it's been a long time since we did the bond campaign of 2013. And the promise was always, we will not increase that bond and interest, but we were pretty transparent that valuations are going to go up, that will increase your taxes, and we have to open that building, so the operating costs are going to go up, and the taxes will go up as well. I'm not sure everybody will remember that, and I didn't get to talk to everybody in Olathe, so I'm sure we may hear a little bit about that as the tax bills go out. Olathe Northwest, they opened with the 3 mills. And as we look at BOTA, BOTA is always this thing that has been a revenue stream in our growing district for decades. However, with that slowed growth, we have to realize we're going to have to get past our dependency on that revenue source. Now, we have two buildings being built right now after West opens. We have the middle school and the elementary. So that's why about 2020, 21, we will start, after that year, we're going to start to see a decrease in that funding source. So we'll have to prepare ourselves to wean off of that revenue source. It'd be wonderful if we hear that that the base aid is going to be much higher than the 4,006, because that would help aid us in not utilizing BOTA as extensively. I want to talk a little bit about BOTA because I know it's a kind of a foreign thing, but in 2014-15, if you think about buildings, it's an 8-year process. You get 100% of the operating, your authority is 100% of the operating costs of that building, teachers, electricity, supplies. When you open it, you get 100% for 2 years, then you get 90% in the third year, and then it goes down 15% every year until you're weaned off of that. But at any given time, we might have 10 or 8 buildings in play. You know, Olathe West will be in its first year next year, but Mission Trail is just coming off because as they get to be 8 years old, they'll be off of that schedule. So in 14-15, we had $9.5 million and we used all of our authority. The one positive thing about the block grant was it froze BOTA, even though on our schedules, we should have had to decrease to 7.3 million. And then in 16-17 this year, we should have gone down to 5.5. We are allowed to keep that authority through that block grant, which was a great benefit to us. For 17-18, that same group of buildings would only give you the authority of $3.7 million. However, the opening of West on paper is $16.8 million of new authority in order to open that building. That equates to about 7 mils of authority. Now, I'm not going to be recommending you use all 7 mils because 2 reasons: tax sensitivity with an increased assessed valuation, and also it makes it more difficult to get off of BOTA in 2021. If we look a little closer at BOTA, this budget, the way we've built it to say, let's keep that $9.5 million worth of authority and let's utilize that again, and then let's increase that $8,250,000. That has an overall impact of about a 5 mil increase. Now, before you panic that, well, I don't think I want to go 5 mils, remember what I said in the beginning, the notice of hearing you can always reduce your levies from that point, you cannot increase them. So I've kind of put them up a little high right now so that we have room to discuss and determine, do we want to shift more things to capital outlay or not, and start pulling that down. But I've set it at 5.025 right now. Legal maximum budget in the state of Kansas essentially says to keep the same buying power behind every kid in Kansas. You go through this calculation through the state budget documents, it comes up with a legal maximum budget. And I don't care what happens in your community, you can't go tax more and get more money. It's to keep everything equalized across the state. Last year, that was $262 million. Under the block grant, capers went to the general fund, and the legal max is made up of the general fund and the LOB fund. So under the new law, capers is back to, the revenue goes to the capers fund like it used to 3 years ago. So I've adjusted that legal max to try and figure out how much are all these changes going to yield for the school district. So adjusted, it's $247 million. Before I do any of that buffering or 10% increase in those weightings, our legal max was $262 million. So all that legislation and the way the kids line up in our weightings is going to yield us about $15 million in new dollars next year. If we go with the scenario that I've set up, let's increase our BOTA by $8.2 million. That's going to add $11 million. Why? If you're adding $8 million of BOTA, how does that multiply up to $11 million? BOTA goes into the general fund. The general fund gets bigger. You multiply general fund by 33% to come up with your LOB. So you kind of get a double. You get the BOTA and you get the LOB. But it comes at having to increase levy. And that all the combination of levies, it takes 5 mils to get at that $11 million. That would provide us $26 million as a starting point. Whether or not we feel we can go to that extent, we'll have to do some prioritization of some of the items we've been discussing throughout the spring. How's that look on a fund-by-fund basis? Basically, we see the local option budget goes up 3.8 mils, extraordinary growth 3.4, cost of living is down about a half a mil, special assessment down, and bond and interest. Overall, that yields a 5 mil increase. Why are these things happening? General fund doesn't move because statutorily it's set at 20 mils. We have no control over that, so that's why you see no change. Local option budget levy, why there's pressure to raise that 3.8 mils is a combination of things. As I mentioned, it's a higher legal max. It's a bigger general fund, so when you multiply 33%, it yields a lot more. Even though our valuations are up, it still says to get all that money, you gotta raise the mill levy itself. That higher base funding is driving the legal max up. Once again, 33% of a bigger number yields a bigger number. When you have money left over from taxing on LOB, it has to carry forward to the next year to reduce the taxes. Last year we had a big balance. We collected very well 2 years ago. So we carried about $5 million forward, and that lowered how much we had to tax to come up with the same amount of LOB. This year the balance was much lower. So it's put pressure on increasing that rate to generate the same dollars. And the more you use BOTA, the more it drives that levy up. So if we choose not to use a 5 mil increase, which is driven mostly by that BOTA calculation, you'll see both local option budget come down and this extraordinary growth or BOTA. The sole reason driving that increase is Olathe West High School. Special liability, that's where we put some of our insurance premiums that are allowed. And as you recall, they were flat increases, therefore the levy doesn't have to move. The slight increases that are in there for claims, the valuation increase covered those enough. Cost of living is down. And I've modified this at the last moment, so if you might want to jot this down in your hard copy if you'd like. Cost of living, special assessment in particular. Cost of living, we have a higher home price, which should basically, it says you should be able to raise more money through your COLA because it's expensive to live in Johnson County as judged by what the average home price is doing. However, that 9% assessed valuation growth is pushing it back down and saying, okay, you actually can it's gonna lower to raise the same dollars. Special assessment are those benefit districts that we participate in. There aren't as many anymore. They're coming off the rolls, areas that we've participated in. So it's decreasing because of that, and as well a higher assessed valuation requires a smaller rate to generate the same dollars. Bond and interest, we kind of peaked last year, and we've dropped down our scheduled payments for next year, or about, I believe, $5 or $6 million less. And that higher assessed valuation is driving that rate down. In addition, those of you that have been involved in our debt curve discussions, we're very conservative about what we think state aid is going to be and what we believe assessed valuation growth is going to be. And it's been both of those have been very strong the last 3 years. So we've built up a good cash balance in that bond fund that is not necessary to carry our existing debt and some modeling for future debt as well. So that I've discussed that with Dustin Navy of Piper Jaffray, and he's more than comfortable with that decrease in mill rate. Those all net to 5 mils. Where do you stand on your authority? You've either met your budgetary obligations, where some funds you just set it exactly on what we're going to spend. Others you've maxed out. The only thing you have not utilized completely is BOTA. There's still $2.8 million you could try to levy if you so desired. I always like to show this slide because on the tax bill there's a lot of lines. So we have 8 levies, but they really fall onto 3 lines, and they show a little different story when you start to roll some of them together. The 20 mils doesn't move, so that always looks very good. skip the second one for a moment. Bond and interest is going to show that it's going down 1.389, and that's an 8.5% decrease. But the other 6 levies, the LOB, the special assessment, when you combine all of those, they go, the extraordinary growth, or BOTA, they'll go up 6.4 in this model, this maximized model, and that will show as a 20% increase. Now I'm going to spend a little time and educate you a little bit about how all this assessed valuation, how you figure out the taxes for your house. And you'll see the impact if we were to keep it at this maximum level, what kind of impact it has on the average home in Olathe. COLA is based on the average home price, so we have some data. It's always a year old. So in 2016, the average home in Olathe was $243,737. For the general fund, there's a thing called the homestead deduction. You take $20,000 off of the value of your home, the market value of your home. That adjusts down to $223,737 then for the general fund, but stays at $243,737 for all other levies. Home residential property is assessed at 11.5% of that market value. So you multiply by 11.5, you'll come with an appraised value of $25,730 and $28,030. That was 2016. So if I apply the 9.9, so if the average house gets the average increase in assessed valuation, which I don't think I've ever found this house that in existence, that means the 2017 assessed valuation will be $28,277 and then $30,805. If we went forward with a full 5 mills, it would create a levy of 72.799. 20 mills of general fund, 52.799 of everything else. So how much, if we do nothing, will the taxes go up if you're the average home with the average 9.9 increase? It's $51 in the general fund and $133 for all the other 7 funds, excuse me. So once we figure that, if you add 5.025 mils, it's going to be another $155. So that average home, all in, because of assessed valuation increase, and if we go up 5.025, we would see a $339 annual increase, or kind of their mortgage escrow would start to see a 28.25 every month increase. That helps kind of gauge what's the impact, whether you choose to do 3, 4, 6. At 5, this is the impact. Just for a levy history, and this is not to justify why you might want to do it, I just wanted to show you where we've been. In 2010-11, the board fully utilized their LOB authority. If you recall, for a while, they were very cautious about going all the way to 33. They did that because of some evaluation growth and just changes in block grants and legislation. It's been creeping down since then, and this would put it right back up where it was. Our next steps are tonight, we're hoping the board would consider a motion to authorize me to publish that notice of hearing for its 10-day waiting period. So we would publish on the 12th. We would have our public hearing and a special board meeting, if you so approve, on August 24th to finalize the budget and adopt it. And on August 25th, the due date, I can get to the county offices and file our budget and levies. I know there's you might have lots of questions, and I can stand for them now, but also I'll make myself available if you want to come in and meet or at all. I'd be happy to do that between now and then. Just a reminder, you're not approving any budgets this evening, and you're just approving that we're going to publish the maximum amount we would even look at, and you can always go down on these budgets and these levies. You just can't go up. That's why I've set them pretty high right now, just to provide flexibility as we wrestle with some of your questions.
Before we get into any questions, I do want to point out and just reiterate what John had just mentioned about there are 2 action items we are going to add after our questions get answered here this evening. One, to give John that authority to or publicize the notice of hearing, and then also to set the August 24th as the public, where we'd actually sit down and approve the budget. And that is before us here, so I want to let also all our guests here this evening to make them aware of that as well. John, you had mentioned, I talked this about earlier, the 9.9% increase in valuation. Is that set, or are we going to get a different number sooner?
It usually adjusts down ever so slightly. The large appeals and protests have already been processed, but it always moves just a fraction between now and when October, when they prepare the bills. So we'll get a adjusted valuation, and it'll tweak our mill rates a little bit. You'll see a move a thousandth or so of a mill, because we're not setting rates. We're actually levying those amounts in our budget, and therefore the county just adjusts the mill rate till he can get to that amount. So we've seen, 3 1,000ths or 1 100th adjustment in mill rates.
Small amount.
It's very, very small amounts.
Other questions of the board?
I have a question about sort of the padding that you do. State law changed this year so that we have to use our previous year's plan to our budget. That was to give the state a little more, a better ability to plan for what they're going to be spending.
Correct.
Doesn't really work so well for growing districts, but we can adjust to it. In the past, we added to our FTE.
Yes.
In order to bump ourselves up, to give ourselves a little room. And you said we're adding 10% now to the weightings instead. Is that
Correct.
right?
That's correct.
How did you come up with 10%? And have you looked at what other districts are doing, or was that recommended somehow?
No, we actually, our controller and I just literally from some experience of how those move around, we can look at kind of where we were. We felt 10 would be more than enough to cover.
Okay.
Unfortunately, some of it's feeling your way still. They're very specific that you've got to spend this money on at-risk, and you've got to spend it on bilingual. And I set it up that I upped each one of them 10%. I think since then, I've confirmed you do have to spend it on at-risk, but if you misjudged on bilingual, you were a little low, but a little high on at-risk, it wouldn't affect it. You could still spend it all out in the right places. It's not like they wouldn't send you the money, but I wanted to be careful, so I upped each weighting that's impacted by the 10%. And we'll see and start a track record this year. We'll be able to measure it and start building a history.
So you talked a little bit about moving some expenses over into capital outlay. If the Supreme Court comes back and says that we can't do that, do we have enough cushion built in the budget to bring those back into the general fund?
They're all in the general fund right now.
Okay.
So that the situation would only improve if we could.
Okay.
From
Gotcha.
an operating standpoint. It's the challenge long term of more going in there.
I understand. Okay.
Kind of a follow-up to that, would we be able to do that if the Supreme Court doesn't decide in the next month? I mean, can we do that once the budget's set?
It's a great question, and I probably should have explained that. As soon as we know, if it is allowed, then we will have to republish our capital outlay levy. If you recall, we did that, I think 2 or 3 years ago. Every 5 years, we go back out. You have to reestablish your 8 mills as a max. You now can do it as continuous and permanent. So the next time the board may want to consider that. We'll change the definition of what we can buy out of that to mirror the law. It has a longer posting period. You have to do it 2 consecutive weeks on the same day of the week, and I can't remember how many days, 30 days then to the hearing. What Dale Dennis has informed us is everybody will start that up, and probably about October, you'll have it all done. You can prorate. So utilities from that point, you can start charging to capital outlay. You wouldn't be able to charge the whole years. So once you have it republished and in place, adopted by the board, gone through if there is no petition to it, then you could start charging. So we run about $7 million in utilities a year. So you can do the math, whatever month it happens. Let's say we get it done just in a half a year. You could do $3.5 million this year. Next year, you could do all $7 million.
So then would that affect the budget, the mill levy for the budget this year, or would that
No,
just
it
be
would-
money
what it
that
would
we would
affect is you
have?
would not do projects in the you would not have as much available in the capital outlay fund to do repair work and projects. You would utilize it for utilities. It's neutral in the budget scenario.
Okay.
It wouldn't affect levies, but it would sure help operationally. You may choose not to increase, if we know in time, you may choose not to use as much BOTA and shift costs over to capital outlay, and now I've got operating funds to help with the opening of West.
Okay.
That's why the timing is so critical. It'd be nice to know that piece before we adopt the budget.
And we adopt the budget at August
24th.
So that's kind of our drop dead date. Okay.
Some counties, and I believe Johnson County Assessor has said we could have to the 28th, but I didn't know what the weekend was going to gain us, and it's a little uncharted. I didn't do the legal research, but I didn't want to get caught in a technicality that we had not filed by the 25th, even though the assessor said, the county clerk said we could. That if the statute is, I didn't think it was worth hiring an attorney right now because we can get it done by the 25th.
Yes, we can get it done. Additional questions for John? Or discussions or other comments of board members?
You know, I wouldn't mind having continuous conversation about this, the history of our mill levy, because I was on the board when it started to fall, and the conversation was, people have short memories, you know, I'm really happy for that decrease, but it's kind of time to start reminding them that, you know, that's where we used to hang out, and getting back up there is not fun, but can kind of be expected as soon as we're given the authority to start taking care of our schools again.
Taking care of the schools, the existing buildings, and also building new ones.
I think I'd like to point out, if you don't mind, just everybody reads these reports that say, okay, Olathe is going to get 15 million and Shawnee Mission gets X. What really is lost in that translation is you saw what your LOB rate is doing. It's doing that to get at some of that state aid that are on those reports. You have to make that move. So if you choose not to, then suddenly Olathe has 8 million instead of 15, or whatever the number is. I don't think people are translating that you have to have a little skin in the game to get at what's on those reports.
Thank you, John. Well, if there are no additional questions or comments or discussion that we have, I would look for a motion.
I'd move to approve the notice of hearing for publication in the Olathe News on Saturday, August 12th, 2017.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Wycliffe and a second by Ms. Martin. Please
Miss-
call the roll.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
Mr. McCune?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
And also look for a motion for publishing the meeting for August the 24th.
I move to move to approve special board meeting on August 24th, 2017, following the Olathe Public Schools fiscal year 18 budget hearing, to make the final modifications and approve the state budget documents for certification to the county, Kansas State Department of Education.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Beveridge and a second by Mr. Wycliffe. Joyce, call.
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
Mr. McCune?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
And we have some time before our comfort break. I would like to go ahead and proceed with the consent action items. If we could do that. A couple of items that I would like to just have a little additional information on. That would be one from Dr. Banikowski. That would be 5.09, but also from Dr. Dane, 50607, 9, and also 10. So why don't we go ahead and have those presentations, and then we'll include them all.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to visit with you about these. I'm going to go through these in the order that they're numbered on the agenda for you. The first is a really big celebration. We're very excited about this. If you remember last year, we piloted the work keys at OATC. We had 118 students take that, and that is an assessment. It's a work credential that students can take, and we had 113 students pass that assessment that now have a work credential on their resume. Very excited about that. That exam does cost $32 to administer per student. We're very excited that Kansas Works has announced they are going to partner with us and allow us to give this assessment to all students who are 18 years or older for free. And so that is a great opportunity for us and for our students, and this hasn't been done in any other school districts. But if an adult would go to Kansas Work and apply for a job, they would take that entry level with no cost to them. So we're getting that same benefit for our students that are 18 years or older. So with that, we would really like to capitalize and buy the materials so that teachers and students can prepare for that assessment. And so that is what item 506 is for, is buying those instructional materials and that curriculum. So we're buying that for our middle schools and our high schools, so they will all have that. But in addition to that, we're going to make sure that our special education students and ELL students are capitalizing on this. As we look at the individual plan of study and know that not all of our students are going to graduate and go directly to college, we want to do everything in our power to make sure they're prepared and we're aligning with their individual plan of study. So we're really excited about this, and that would be what item 5.06 is about. If we look at item 5.07, that is a curriculum item. That's for middle school choral music. And there are actually 3 courses that are encompassed in this report. You know, about every 7 years, we try to do a refresh with our curriculum, and that process includes curriculum coordinators, it includes teachers around the district. And so this group has been actively working on that. The last time that this curriculum was approved was 2009. And so then in 2014, new choral music standards, the national standards came out. And so with that, in 2015, the state standards came out. And so we try to align with those standards. And so this group now is asking for approval for that new curriculum that they have written. Moving to item 5.08, we also have middle school theater curriculum. And there are 4 courses that are encapsulated in that. And again, the last time that we had curriculum approved in this area was 2009, so aligning with the new national and state standards. These teachers and curriculum coordinator have worked diligently to prepare this and would love to have your consent on that curriculum. And then our last item, which would be 5.10, would be textbooks, or actually a resource. This would be somewhat of a new resource for us. In 2008, we had some math intervention items for math essentials at the middle school. And in looking at what we're offering, we're wanting to have a new intervention in place. And so we right now have Read 180, which would be a tier 3. If we look at that multi-system tiered supports that we have for students in reading, we have Read 180, and now we would like to couple that with Math 180. So our middle school students that need some additional support in addition to being in the classroom and what's going on in that core area, having those interventions of support. So 510 is asking for consent for us to purchase some new curriculum for them, or resources for them. I'll turn that over to you, Dr. B, 5.09.
Thank you, Dr. Dane. Just kind of following in the whole format of teaching and learning and looking at refreshing curriculum and getting new resources for our educators in the classroom, we also brought forth to you the 21st Century Capstone Curriculum. As you know, we've been going through about a 2-year process in revitalizing our 21st Century Academies, as well as adding 6 new ones. So of those 15 academies, one of the criteria is that all students in their senior year do a capstone project and then do a presentation of that project. Kind of capsulizes that 4 years of study that they have had. We have had just a little smattering of curriculum and in the area, but we didn't have really a very good consistent curriculum. So we worked together, the 21st Century Academy facilitators and some teaching and learning coordinators, and determined we could come up with a master capstone curriculum that would go for all the academies. And some of the factors that you saw in the board report was, first of all, we made sure that we incorporated the student professional learning experiences. Of course, we have to have an acronym, and these are now called PLEs. And again, we refresh that process, so we have a more descriptive process when a student is going to go out and either work for the district attorney and make a video, or they're going to be on site at Black and Veatch for an internship opportunity. So we incorporated pieces of that in our capstone curriculum as we prepare our students for that experience. The second thing that we incorporated were the employability skills. You might remember that we have identified 8 essential employability skills based on the input of about 500 different business and organization higher ed folks that came to our different tables. So we identified those, and these are what we believe are our steps to success: collaboration, ethics, building their portfolio, working on resume, making sure they know how to interview, all those essential employability skills. That is also part of the capstone curriculum. We believe we'll be teaching them all 4 years in the academy, but we will be also assessing them at the end of their 4-year experience. So that's part of it as well. And the final part of it was to make sure that we identified what the endorsement is. What is the criteria to get an endorsement in animal health or to get an endorsement in engineering? And again, we kind of were a little bit all over the place for our different academies, but we came to agreement this year in consensus. There are 3 levels of endorsement that you can achieve: an endorsement, I have to read this, with honors, and an endorsement with high honors. So it kind of depends on the coursework that you take, as well as the amount of E-hours, extension hours, and experiences that you have. So that also was woven into the development of the capstone curriculum. So what you see before you is a curriculum that will be tailored to the different academies, depending on their content and technical skills they're teaching, but also incorporates a lot of those overarching principles that we think are very important for our students in the 21st Century Academy.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Banikowski and Dr. Dane. It's nice to refresh our memories on what our kids and children are seeing in our classrooms. Unless there's any other questions or comments?
I'd move to approve items 5.01 through 5.10 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Wycliffe and a second by Mr. Beveridge. Joy?
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
Mr. McCune?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
We still have a little bit of time left. I think I would like to, if it's okay with the board, move on to the action.
Absolutely.
Bids, contracts, and agreements. Did anybody have any questions on the agenda item? I would like to ask John or Greg, 6.01 on the pool. Whichever one would like to take the microphone.
We were notified in May by the pool contractor that was selected and awarded the contract for middle school number 10 that they would be going out of business before they would be able to complete the pool at middle school 10. We were at a good convenient stopping point on the pool. There's a lot of underground piping that goes in early in the project, and then the rest of the pool is completed late in the project. We were at a stopping point. So we decided then rather than try to make it to the end with them, we would close our contract with that contractor and enter into negotiations with the second low bidder to mobilize onto the project. As a part of that, residential pools, there may be a large number of contractors in this area that can build an outdoor residential pool. There are really only 3 qualified contractors that our consultant and us agree can build an indoor natatorium like we have, and all 3 of them bid the project. The high bidder was not willing to rebid. They had already booked 4 projects. They won't be able to get to our pool. So we really didn't have that choice of, let's just go to the second and third bidder and rebid the project, because we would have only received 1 bid anyway. That's the second low bidder, and that's who we chose to negotiate with. This is their cost to complete the pool. To help the 2 pools, Mission Trail, Casey Gunite, who are recommending tonight, was the pool contractor for Mission Trail. Continental Pools was the contractor for the previous 2 middle schools. So we felt comfortable with both of them, but we only have one of them that can complete the pool in time for us to open this pool.
And no additional cost to the district?
Well, there is some additional cost. One, they were the second low bidder, so you know, there was about $67,000 or $68,000 difference between the 2 bids on bid day, and then they've had some inflation in cost since then.
Okay.
So the total increase is about $175,000 over the previous bid, over the previous contract. Some of that was reflected on bid day. Some of it is because this increase in cost since they gave us a bid.
It's still below the budgeted amount, though. Is
It's
that
still
right?
below the
Okay.
budgeted amount, and this is once again a project in which we have reserves, you know, in the project budget to cover contingencies like this as well as change orders.
Sure.
So we're still within budget for the project and under the estimate that we had felt the pool would cost.
Great.
It's one of those unfortunate things we'd like for all of our contractors to be clean, but occasionally this is a problem that you come up with. I think this is the best solution that we can reach.
Thank you, John. Unless there's any additional questions on the action items, bids, or contracts, I'd look for a motion.
You want to take them all together?
Take them all.
I move to approve action items 6.01 through 6.05 as presented.
Second.
Have a motion by Ms. Martin, a second by Mr. Wycliffe. Joy?
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCune?
Yes.
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
We still have a minute. Action and other items.
As we've already seen a presentation or had some comments on item 7.01, you guys good with taking these together as well?
I am.
I'm well, as long as you're okay with the committee assignments that you were chosen for.
Indeed.
And we have three members that can't defend themselves, so.
Now would be the time to switch
Yeah.
committee assignments with one of those three if you want.
That's a good point.
I'd move to approve items 7.01 through 7.03 as presented.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Wycliffe and a second by Mr. Beveridge. Roll.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
Mr. McCune?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
And with that, 6:45, we'll enjoy our comfort break. There is a chance to meet some of the new administrators in the HR room just across the hall here, so I want to invite other board members to meet with them, and we'll see you back here at 7 o'clock.
Good evening. I'm thrilled to present our recognitions tonight. I'd like to welcome all of our distinguished guests. We're going to begin our recognitions tonight by honoring our summer teacher externs. I'd like to ask Heather Schoonover from Community Development and Barb Gonzalez, Career and Technical Education Coordinator, to come forward to assist with this recognition. Continuing a rich tradition of enhancing staff professional development with our community partners, teachers annually spend 1 or 2 weeks during the months of June and/or July working with a local business. This provides educators the opportunity to find real-life connections that can be incorporated into their classroom to enhance their curriculum. Tonight, we're going to recognize both the staff as well as the business partners. Honorees, when I call your name, please come forward. Stephanie Dupree, Family and Consumer Science teacher from Olathe South, who was mentored by Dan Jansen from The Rub and Jeannie McKay from The Tasteful Olive. Robin Ike, Family and Consumer Science teacher from Olathe North, who was mentored by Mary Riffle from Hy-Vee Olathe. Brandon Hernandez, math teacher from Olathe Northwest, who was mentored by Emily Roden from Burns and McDonald. Jordan Landis, Family and Consumer Science teacher from Olathe Northwest, who was mentored by Brenda Groover from Groover Interior Design, and Jenny Huttinger from Finkel and Williams Architecture. Amy Nail, Family and Consumer Science teacher from Olathe North, who was mentored by Chris Loomis from the Johnson County Department of Health and Environment. And Jessica Collins, business teacher from Olathe Northwest, who was mentored by Harley Ellsworth from Kansas Coffee Cafe. Congratulations and thank you to our mentors for the time you have provided to our teachers.
I love the Hillbilly Bowl.
Congratulations. Next, we'd like to recognize the Kansas 6A State Speech Champions. I'd like to ask Josh Price, Richard Belsky, and Larry Swanson to come forward along with students A.B. Kava and Zach Walentine. Olathe North and Olathe Northwest debate and forensics teams recently received state and national recognition. We actually had 2 students who were unable to be here tonight, but we want to make sure we recognize them for their accomplishments. Austin Shively from Olathe Northwest was named a state champion in dramatic interpretation. Rima Tala from Olathe North was a state informative speech runner-up. And now for those who are here tonight, Amy Kaba. Amy. She's not. Oh, okay. She was the state speech champion in poetry interpretation. And Zach Walentine from North was a state runner-up in impromptu speech and finished in the top 10 out of over 250 students in congressional debate held at the national championship. This is Amy.
Yes.
Congratulations, Amy, on your state speech championship in poetry interpretation. And congratulations to you all. I know your families are here. We'd love for them to stand and be recognized as well. Congratulations. Amy, does yours? Next, we'd like to recognize our outstanding spring athletes and state champions. If Tim Brady, our district athletic director, could come forward to assist with these recognitions. We're going to start with the Olathe Northwest Ravens softball team. If you could come forward, along with Coach Mark Mahoney, Principal Chris Zook, and Athletic Director Joe Gunderson. The Olathe Northwest Ravens softball team was named the 2017 6A state champions back in late May. This was the school's 3rd softball state victory. Additionally, 6 players were named to the Kansas Coaches Association All-State Team, which is more than any other team in the state of Kansas. Congratulations to you. Congratulations. I know your families are here. We'd love for them to stand and be recognized as well. Mom, stand. Congratulations. And now on to our state track and field champions. We had a number of individual and relay winners in the Kansas 6A State Track and Field Championships. The following come forward as I call your name. From Olathe North High School, Dana Baker, State Javelin Champion, and Brandon Clark, 800-meter run champion, along with Athletic Director Josh Price. From Olathe Northwest, Julian Lacey, 400-meter champion, Rachel Mayberry, pole vault champion, along with Principal Chris Zook, Athletic Director Joe Gunderson, and Coach Dee Bell. And I also want to add that Olathe Northwest also had Maddie Ryder was the state girls high jump champion, but she couldn't be here tonight. The Northwest girls and their teammates took second in state, missing the state title by only 2 points. Let them get caught up. From Olathe East High School, I'd like to ask Bailey Turner, long jump champion, to come forward along with Athletic Director Amanda Fonts and Coach Mike Wallace. And last but not least, from Olathe South, the 4x4 meter relay state championship team of Robert Adger, Nolan McKay, Emmanuel Okwane, Cameron Waldo, and alternate Jamison Phelps. If you could come forward along with Principal Clint Albers and Coach Matt Bohm. And that is our state track and field champions. Congratulations.
Everybody signed up for public.
Nope.
And of course, we want your families to stand and be recognized as well. Track and field champion families. Congratulations.
It's better assessment.
Laptops.
At this point, unless we need to.
Shannon.
Yeah.
Susan, okay.
Yeah.
Susan Ray leaves. Good job. There's a lot of them.
At each regular meeting, the Board of Education reserves limited time for individuals wishing to address the board. We request that individual speakers limit their comments to 5 minutes. The clerk will monitor the time and notify the speaker when the 5-minute time limit has expired. Please direct your comments to the entire board. If a response is appropriate, the president will respond or refer to another individual. In an effort to respect privacy, we ask that speakers refrain from discussing personal complaints involving individual staff members or students. Those speaking are advised that public comments are videotape recorded for broadcast on the district's Educational Access channel and audio recorded as a matter of public record. Individuals addressing the board should come to the podium at the front of the room and state your name and address.
I don't believe we have anybody here this evening, so we will proceed. Proceed to future action items on the agenda. Anybody have any thoughts or comments? If not, any board member have any topics for discussion or anything you'd like to bring up? Mr. Allison? Any comments?
Just a couple quick comments. It's a busy time of year. I do want to say thank you to all of our staff that have worked throughout the summer, our custodians, our service center, our teaching and learning, everyone that works throughout the summer to get ready for the next school year. And it's right around the corner. Tomorrow morning, we will welcome almost 300 new teachers to the district. And that's, I think, one of the largest groups we've had in a number of years. Am I correct? So that will be exciting, and that's always kind of, you know, school's ready to start when your new staff is arriving. We have then our first day of school is August 16th. So we're less than 2 weeks away from being back in full swing. So it'll be good to get everybody back and our students in our building so we can do what we do best. I'm looking forward to that.
Executive session. We are looking 30 minutes, unless anybody needs to add additional time. Somebody
If
like
Mike
to-
Toland here to
I don't have him conference in.
move that the board go into executive session to discuss salary, benefits, and related items of the bargaining unit pursuant to the exception for employer-employee negotiations under COMA, consultation with an attorney for the body or agency related to matters in litigation pursuant to the exception for matters which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship under COMA, and that the board return to the regular meeting at 7:45 in this room.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Beveridge and a second by Mr. Wycliffe. Joy?
Mr. McCune?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Wycliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
We'll return in 30.
Grab those treats and take them in.
Adjourned. We are adjourned.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you.